We started this wanting to know why a 130-year-old law is suddenly back in the headlines, and we ended up somewhere I didn't expect, which is that the fight over antitrust was never really about economics. It was about who gets to have power in a democracy and whether anyone gets to be that big.
And I came in thinking trust busting was Teddy Roosevelt swinging a big stick at a cartoon octopus, and I came out realising the octopus was real. Genuinely a real thing. Sorry, I'm Matteo Silva, and I promise most of my references land better than that one.
I'm Priya Nair, and I'll be trying to keep the three of us from disappearing down a rabbit hole about railway rebates.
Which is a threat, because I would happily go down that hole. Sean Boyd, I'm the one who's going to keep asking, wait, is that actually what happened? Or is that the version we all half remember?
Oh, we're gonna get on great.
So let's start with that octopus, Matteo, because the word itself, antitrust, is strange. What is the trust?
Right, so the trust is the villain, and also just a boring legal instrument. A trust, in the plain sense, is when you hand your property to someone to hold and manage for somebody else's benefit. Late 1800s, American industrialists took that dusty little tool and weaponised it. Instead of 100 separate oil companies competing, the shareholders hand their stock to a board of trustees, one set of hands now steering the whole industry.
And the reason that mattered, this is the part people skip, is that at the time, a company in one state generally couldn't own stock in a company in another. The trust was the workaround. You couldn't legally merge, so you did this instead.
So it's a loophole that grew into an empire.
More or less. The classic case is Standard Oil. Rockefeller. By the late 1870s, early 80s, that structure let one organization control the overwhelming majority of oil refining in the country.
And here's where it gets vivid, because it wasn't just they were big, their tactics were nasty. Standard Oil cut secret deals with the railroads, rebates. So every barrel Rockefeller shipped cost him less than his competitor shipping the identical barrel on the identical train.
Wait, so the railroad is charging his rivals more for the same service? On purpose?
On purpose. And in some versions, the railroad even pays Standard a cut on the rival shipment, so you're funding the company that's strangling you. You either sell to Rockefeller or you go under, and a lot of people sold.
I want to be careful here, because this is where the mythology thickens. A lot of what we know about Standard Oil comes through Ida Tarbell's expose in the early 1900s, which was serious, careful journalism, but she also had a personal stake. Her father was in the oil business.
Her father was one of the people who got squeezed?
Affected by that world, yes, doesn't make her wrong. The Supreme Court in 1911 looked at the market share and the conduct and agreed the monopoly was real. But it means the story got told by someone with fire in it, and that fire is part of why the public turned.
Honestly, thank goodness for the fire. Sometimes you need someone who's furious to make people look at the ledger.
So the public turns. What does the government actually reach for?
The Sherman Act, 1890, and it's remarkable how short and sweeping it is. 2 core ideas. Section 1, every contract or combination or conspiracy in restraint of trade is illegal. Section 2, monopolizing or trying to monopolize is illegal.
That's it? In restraint of trade?
And the judges immediately panicked, because if you read it literally, every partnership restrains trade. 2 people agreeing not to compete with each other is a restraint of trade. So the whole first stretch of antitrust history is courts trying to figure out what Congress could possibly have meant.
It's like a law that says don't be too grabby, and then everyone spends 30 years arguing about 2.
That's exactly it though, isn't it? They wrote a mood, not a rule.
And for the first decade or so, almost nobody enforced it. The presidents of the 1890s weren't interested. Meanwhile, there's a wave of mergers happening right under it.
So the law exists, and the octopus is just growing more arms while everyone looks away.
Then the progressive era arrives, and the temperature changes. Under Theodore Roosevelt, the Justice Department starts actually bringing cases, dozens of them. And under his successor, Taft, even more. Taft's administration brought a striking number of suits, arguably more than Roosevelt's, which cuts against the whole Teddy the Trustbuster image.
Oh, I love that, because Roosevelt gets the mythology.
Roosevelt gets the statue. Taft gets the paperwork. That's the story of a lot of careers, mate.
You mentioned the octopus as a cartoon, and I think this is worth sitting on because the imagery did real political work.
Massively. There's this famous cartoon from the 1880s, the bosses of the Senate. You've got these enormous bloated money bag figures labelled with the industries: steel, copper, oil, sugar, coal, and they're looming over these tiny little senators at their desks. And there's a door at the back for the monopolists, and a door for the people that's bolted shut.
That's a good example of a thing being emotionally true before it's legally proven. That image told people, your elected representatives don't work for you. They work for the bags of money.
And that's the thread I keep pulling on. Because the economic argument, prices, efficiency, that's one thing. But the cartoon isn't about prices. It's about power. It's about the fear that a handful of men have quietly bought the government.
And the surveys back up that this instinct never left, by the way. When you poll economists, a large majority have consistently said antitrust laws should be enforced vigorously. And in more recent surveys, something like 85% agreed corporate economic power has become too concentrated. That's not a fringe view among the people who study it.
See, that surprises me. I always assumed economists were the ones going, leave the market alone, it'll sort itself.
It's a common assumption, and it's mostly wrong. The profession has leaned pro-enforcement for a long time.
Okay, so 1911, the court says Standard Oil has to break up into 34 separate companies. And I want to know, did it work? Did the octopus die?
This is the great irony, and I want to state it carefully. The pieces of Standard Oil became some of the largest companies of the 20th century. The descendants of that breakup include the giants that later became Exxon and Mobil.
So you smash the octopus, and the tentacles just grow into their own octopuses?
In market cap terms, yes. But did it work? Depends entirely on what you thought the goal was. If the goal was no big oil companies ever again, no, obviously not. If the goal was to break a single chokehold over an entire industry and restore some competition between rivals, that's a much more defensible yes.
And that same 1911 ruling is where the courts invent the escape hatch, right? The rule of reason.
Exactly. The court says, look, the statute says every restraint of trade, but we can't possibly mean every. We'll only ban the unreasonable ones, case by case.
Which sounds sensible, and is also a massive can of worms. Because now 9 judges get to decide what reasonable means, and that changes with the weather.
And Congress didn't love that, did they?
No, they saw it as the courts softening the law. So in 1914, they passed 2 more statutes, the Clayton Act, which goes after mergers that lessen competition, and the act that creates the Federal Trade Commission, a whole agency to police unfair methods of competition.
So every time the courts watered it down, Congress comes back with a bigger jug. Oh, I like these people.
Here's where I want to bring in the incentives, Sean, because you keep grounding this. Who actually wants antitrust enforcement? Because the trusts are rich and organized, and the people being squeezed are diffuse.
That's the eternal problem, and it's why enforcement comes in waves. The beneficiaries of a monopoly are concentrated and motivated. The victims? Consumers paying a bit more, the small refiner who got crushed, the town with one employer. They're scattered. So enforcement tends to spike when someone manages to focus that scattered anger. A journalist, a crash, a president who reads the room.
And then it fades again when everyone gets comfortable.
Right. Look at the stretch after 1914. You'd think, new laws, new agency, off we go. But enforcement was pretty tame for years, partly because of the First World War. Business and government had cooperated closely to run the war economy, and a lot of leaders came out thinking maybe cooperation is good, actually. Maybe competition is the wasteful thing.
Oh, that's a real turn. So the argument flips completely.
Completely. And then the Wall Street crash in '29 knocks the confidence out of some people entirely. If the free market just did this, why are we protecting it? Early in the New Deal, there were experiments in the other direction, government helping industries coordinate.
Which is wild, because I think most people picture antitrust as this steady upward line of we got tougher and tougher, and it's not a line at all, it's a heartbeat.
I really like that.
And then it swings again in the mid-30s. The confidence in central planning fades, and advisors start persuading Roosevelt that competition is the way out of the Depression after all. He brings in a wave of lawyers to the Antitrust Division, the famous one being Thurman Arnold, and they go hard.
Give me the texture of that. What does going hard look like?
It looks like a shift in what courts will accept. Through roughly the late 30s into the 70s, you get what people call the structuralist era. The courts basically stopped caring about your clever justifications. If competitors got together and fixed prices, that's illegal, full stop. Per se illegal, they called it. You don't get to explain why it was actually efficient.
So the burden flips. Before, you had to prove the harm. Now the conduct itself is the crime.
For certain conduct, yes, and on mergers they got very strict. There's a case in the early 60s, Brown Shoe, where the court blocks a merger even though the combined company would have had something like 5% of the market.
5%? That's nothing. That's a rounding error.
By today's standards, nothing. But the philosophy then was we would rather have lots of small competitors than a few efficient big ones, even if the big ones might give you cheaper shoes. They were protecting a structure, a texture of the economy, not just a price tag.
And that's the part I find really lovely, actually. It wasn't just, are you ripping off the customer? It was, what kind of country do we want the high street to be?
Yes, and honestly that older view is the right one. Protecting small competitors, keeping the town from having one employer. Somewhere we lost the plot and decided the only question that matters is whether the price ticked down at the checkout.
Hang on, though. We lost the plot is doing a lot there. The reason the focus narrowed to consumer prices wasn't cynicism. It's that protect small competitors gave you results like Brown Shoe, where you block a deal that might have made shoes cheaper for working families purely to keep more shoe companies alive. That's a real cost, and it lands on the people with the least money.
Right, but framing it as cheaper shoes for working families is exactly the move that let concentration run wild for decades. That's the sales pitch, Sean. That's not the outcome.
I'm not selling it. I'm saying if we're being careful, which is the whole point of the show, you can't just wave away the trade-off because it's inconvenient to your framing.
No, that's fair. That came out harder than I meant. You're right that it's a real trade-off. I think what gets me is when the trade-off gets treated as the only lens. Like the power question just evaporates.
And I'm completely with you on that. The price of a shoe is measurable, so it wins arguments. The health of a democracy isn't on the receipt, so it loses them. That asymmetry is real, and it's a problem. I just don't want us to pretend the narrow view was invented in bad faith.
And can I say, this is the good version of this argument. You're not 50 feet apart. You both think power matters. You're arguing about whether the people who nadded it were villains or just solving a different problem.
Yeah, sorry, Sean. The railway rebates got into my blood.
It's a good thing to have in your blood. Better than the alternative.
Okay, let's do the myths directly because we've been circling them. Matteo, what's the biggest thing people get wrong?
Number one, and I believed this until this week, that antitrust is about punishing companies for being big. It isn't. Bigness by itself has never been the crime. It's about how you got big and what you do from up there. You can be enormous because you built a better mousetrap, The law starts twitching when you use the size to crush the next mousetrap before it's born.
That's exactly right, and it's the most common misreading. The statute targets monopolizing, the conduct, not monopoly as a state of being.
My candidate is that it's a settled technical area of law, that there's a right answer and grown-ups know it. And everything we've said today is that it swings hard depending on the mood of the era.
And I'd add a third, which is the belief that economists are uniformly against it. We touched on this. The survey data cuts the other way. Vigorous enforcement has had majority support among economists for decades.
There's a fourth one lurking, which is that it only lives in America. It doesn't. Most of the rest of the world has the same idea under a different name. They call it competition law or anti-monopoly law. Same instinct, less cowboy branding.
Less cowboy branding should be on the poster.
The word antitrust is an American fossil. It's frozen in the language from that specific 1880s fight about the trusts, long after the trusts themselves stopped existing.
So we're near the end, and I want to land the thing we opened on. What does this whole heartbeat of a history actually teach a person who isn't a lawyer?
For me, it's that the law was written vague on purpose, and that's a feature, not a bug. Restraint of trade doesn't age. Congress in 1890 couldn't have imagined the industries we'd need it for, but they wrote a principle broad enough to travel. The cost is that it takes a generation of humans to decide what it means each time.
Mine's a human one, obviously. It's that this stuff moves when a person makes it move. Tarbell with her fury, Arnold with his lawyers, the cartoonist with the money bags. The law sat there dormant for years until somebody with a story lit it up. Structures don't change themselves, people do it, usually one angry specific person at a time.
And mine is the thing that got me heated earlier, so let me say it calmly this time. The reason we still fight about this is that it's never only an economics question. Every one of these eras is secretly a vote on how much private power a democracy is willing to live next to. The prices are the argument you can measure. The power is the argument that actually matters.
And the honest tension, the one worth keeping, is that both of those are real. You can care about the price on the receipt and the money bags in the Senate at the same time. The mistake is pretending you only have to care about one.
Which is a good note, because 30 minutes ago you two nearly went to war over exactly that, and now you're finishing each other's sentences.
That's what a good trade-off does to you. It humbles everyone equally.
I'll take being humbled by the railway rebates. There are worse fates.
For anyone who wants the vivid version, go and look up that Bosses of the Senate cartoon and the Standard Oil story. It's 130 years old and it reads like this morning's news.
And that's the whole point, isn't it? We keep having this fight because we keep building things too big to argue with. Thank you both. This was a proper pleasure to figure out together.
Likewise, truly.
Same. Next time, someone stop me before the octopus jokes.
This episode was generated with AI by Demades.